Hello and welcome everyone in another episode of Researcher Celebrity. And today we have Dr. Manish Kumar with us. And Dr. Manish has done his schooling and college in India. So BSc and MSc was done in Maharshi Dayanand Saraswati University, Ajmer. Following which he moved to Indian Institute for Toxicology Research in Lucknow for his PhD, and then he was awarded as a DBT postdoctoral fellowship, which he worked in ISC Bangalore, and then he moved to United States of America in University of Florida in 2008, and since then US is the place for him. Presently, Dr. Manish is a senior lecturer in Texas State University. We would like to say thank you, Dr. Manish, for spending time and sharing. Looking forward for sharing your journey with our viewers. Welcome, Dr. Manish.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, the first and foremost, how we start our conversation is how you got interested in research as first part.
So, actually, so when I was growing up back in the days, early 90s, um, late 80s, early 90s, we used to watch University Grant Commission sponsored program on television on Doordarshan. That was the only channel that was available that time. And they used to show small college level classes on physics, chemistry. So those was like, I mean, I wasn't sure, but those were like something fascinating to me, and I thought maybe I would be doing something like that. But I did not think about research until during the college, because before that I wanted to go to med school. That didn't happen after 12th, so I switched my career path where I started thinking about going for a long-term research in during the bachelor's program. So I think UGC program and programs and other like there was another science program, Turning Point, that was called back in the days, and Professor Yashpal was the host for that program. So they used to talk about some science issues and ask science questions. So I think those probably were a couple of reasons that sowed those seed in me to go for research. But it wasn't. It was more consolidated when I started in college during the bachelor's.
Okay. So when you did your bachelor's with chemistry, botany, and zoology, while choosing for microbiology for your master's and then doing a toxicology research in PhD, how did you travel this path?
So it just happened because after completion of my bachelor's, I wanted to do master's in chemistry. Um, I come from Rajasthan, and back in those days, there were very limited seats available for chemistry master's program throughout the state, and they were decided based on the merit or your overall aggregate percentage of your bachelor's. And I could not qualify for any of those programs. However, this microbiology program was only offered at MDS University. That was the only place in entire state, and they had like a state level pre-test. So the admission was not based on the bachelor's score, but on the pre-exam. And I was fortunate to qualify that exam, and I was ranked like fourth or fifth in the entire state. So I just entered in that program of microbiology. So instead of chemistry, I started as microbiology, and that time it was kind of new. Everywhere I asked around, people did not have much idea what the microbiology is. Maybe something to do with microbes. So we just joined out of curiosity and out of being successful in getting in the program. So yeah, and I think it was for the better, because I did well in my masters, and then it opened the path for me to join. So I joined first the Central Drug Research Institute (CDRI) for a few months, and then from there I switched to ITRC, that is now called Indian Institute of Toxicology Research.
So can you tell us in brief what you did for your PhD?
So my PhD was on environmental biotechnology. Briefly speaking, it was on bioremediation of pesticides. So interesting thing happened during the master's program. We were given a one-year project, independent project, and I come from a place in Rajasthan, a small city called Pali, and that place has a lot of textile units. So our city generates lots of textile wastewater, and that has contaminated the local river, contaminated the groundwater. So I wanted to look for a bioremediation approach to clean up those textile wastewater. So I did a project on that, and when I came to ITRC, um, I was fortunate to find a lab who was working on pesticide bioremediation. So this was kind of a continuation of what I did in my master's. So I joined that research program on bioremediation.
Okay, so now here I would like to tell our audience that sometimes you have your question, which is theoretical, but sometimes if you look very uh, very cautiously, if you look, you will find problems around you. As Dr. Manish picked the thing which he wanted to work in his from his town, he saw that there is a problem which needs to be addressed, and I think that is the ignition which gives you the most stability in the form that you are more passionate about it and you are more patient because you know that the problem is there for years and it might not get over in it overnight or in a very short time. It needs a lot of time. So, Doctor, when you were doing the bioremediation for insecticides, there was a thought for you that you really want to take your technology to those farmers or to the society.
Yes, so essentially it was a DBT funded project, and the project was to find microbial solution to degrade these pesticides. Although these pesticides were banned in most of the developed nations, however, the problem is that they were still used in developing countries like India, China, even many parts of Africa, or many countries in Africa. So there was continuous use, plus there were like residue all over the world from the past uses were present. So the problem was not completely gone because of the discontinuation of the pesticide. So we had two distinct approaches. One was during the production of pesticide, they produce only 13% of the active chemical, and remaining 85, 87% is all what we call is muck. But that's also the other isomers of the pesticide. So we focused on degrading those isomers at the factory level or at the manufacturing level, at the production level, so that we can reduce that waste that we generate. And then once we apply the active compound in the field, we tested our solution in the field as well. So my thesis was focused on both, and we had very promising data that it can degrade all four isomers. So that was the first report ever in the literature to show that it can degrade all four isomers of the pesticide, alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. There were earlier which were limited, either they will degrade alpha, particularly beta and delta were the most difficult to degrade, but the bacteria that I isolated from a local pesticide factory in Lucknow was capable of degrading all those four isomers. So we did not go for a patent. We did not develop fully in a form of technology because of various financial constraints. But we had this bacteria that we isolated could be potentially used for treatment of those industrial waste plus the soil residue that are present after the application.
Nice. So, as you just mentioned that your work was first of its kind for the publication part and others, how a researcher was feeling, a young boy doing PhD and getting something like reporting for the first time. What was the like?
Yeah. So I was very excited about it because when we found that it can degrade all four isomers, obviously everybody was skeptical that, well, if it does, can you show some metabolites? Can you show some intermediates so that we can believe in the data more? And the degradation was so rapid that it was difficult to catch a metabolite. So, in fact, I had to design experiment to individually test these isomers. So, in a mixture, the degradation was so fast that you can't catch a metabolite, and individually the degradation was so slow that it will not produce or produce very little of metabolite. So I
Mhm.
had to scale up my reactions and produce the metabolite. So we were pretty excited, and it was pretty well received paper. I think if you look at the Google Scholar profile right now, I think that paper has almost around 75 or more citations. That has been cited 75 times in
Mhm.
all the other publications. So pretty exciting. And I think that was the basis that I got the DBT fellowship, because that was one. I only by then I could only publish one paper from my thesis.
Mhm.
Everybody was kind of asking, well, you have only one paper. And then it was published in Environmental Science and Technology, which is the number one journal, number one journal in the area of environmental biotechnology and
Mhm.
environmental engineering.
Mhm.
So, and it is published by American Chemical Society. So I think those were the factors that allowed me to get into the DBT, a comparative DBT postdoctoral fellowship.
So yeah, now when you moved from Lucknow to Bangalore, in terms of weather, in terms of culture, there is a difference in there. How different was the science around you?
Oh, it was a big difference. So I think there was a huge cultural difference on the campus. I love IISc campus. Everybody talks about it, how green it is, how beautiful it is. Lots of. So I lived on campus for 3.5 years. I was part. I was postdoctoral researcher in molecular biophysics unit (MBU), and it was highly competitive place. It was fun to work with, because I was working on understanding some of the basic biology of Mycobacterium tuberculosis. We were using Mycobacterium smegmatis as a model system.
Mhm.
But we have a lot of folks around us who were experts in protein chemistry, crystallography, um, mm, crystal structure of the protein. So yeah, it was pretty exciting, and I had um, a lot of fun there, because the food was different, culture was different. So we had a good time.
Yeah, nice. So speaking of all the differences in culture and science around you, when you moved from Bangalore, IASC, to University of Florida, how was that transition?
Well, I was pretty excited, because I've been applying for postdoctoral fellowship in US for a long time, and my work on the ISC in the ISC was on. So I identified a molecule called cyclic di-GMP in Mycobacterium for the first time. So the paper I published was the first report uh, of the identification, and also was the first report where we identify a protein which has dual function. So
Mhm.
it can act both as a synthetase, which will synthesize the molecule cyclic di-GMP, and it can also act as a phosphodiesterase to break it down.
Mhm.
So I was fortunate enough to pick up on a unique protein, and I cloned it, purified, showed that the activities, and then we made a knockout of that to see if their impact on the biofilm is significant or not.
Mhm.
So that was pretty, and then that paper was also well cited. So within first couple of years, I think we had around 65 citations on that paper.
Mhm.
But after that, when I moved to University of Florida, work was similar on understanding how cyclic di-GMP control biofilms,
Mhm.
but our model system was E. coli.
Mhm.
So when I started working at University of Florida, I worked there for 3.5 years. Unfortunately, there was another group in Europe who kept um, scooping up us out. And so whatever work I did there, I was not able to publish it, because they already published
Mhm.
prior to us on two occasions. One paper came in 2009, another one came in 2012. So all of my research work or all of my data were not published because of that.
So,
and it was a big dent on my career, because postdoctoral research and not able to publish any paper for 4 years went quite against me. And then we lost the grant as well, so I had to switch to another place, and I found University of another postdoctoral position at University of Texas Arlington. So I moved there in 2012.
So the point which you just made is one of a very critical points in all of the researchers' life. When you say that somebody scoops the work, when you have data, you are very excited about the data, you are about to communicate it, and then you see a paper. What happens, because now you are a senior lecturer, so you have seen this through as a student, as a postdoctoral fellow, and now when you are undertaking a researcher under you. So what do you suggest to our young researchers, that with what attitude they should see this, and then how can they be more content about what they are doing?
It's a difficult place to be at or be in, because if you have some data, if you worked and you did not get any public, because the public you did not get any publication out of it, it always detrimental to your growth and progress, because in science or in research, publications unfortunately are the only criteria of your progress. Your grants, your funding, external funding, everything depends on this. So it's good to publish, and I don't know if it is very common to occur to the people, because normally people work in their own niche, in their own domain, so there is very little conflict. So in my case, it was exactly the same project. So they were using the same E. coli model, they were working on the same proteins, and they were working on the same molecule, cyclic di-GMP, to understand its role and how these genes are regulated under different conditions. But if it happens, I mean, there is it becomes hard. So that's why involving in more than one project sometime is advisable. And during the postdoctoral research, I think one of the advice is to kind of branch out from your main research program. So you typically follow your PI's research for a while, but you're also kind of should think about branching it out, so that's something you can call it your own, and have an independent research on it later as you choose it as a career, or if you go as an independent researcher or as a faculty. I think in my case, I made that mistake. I was not able to branch out, and before I could realize, it was already 3.5 years. And also, postdoctoral research should not be longer than 5 years. That's the transition period when most people should transition from their PhD to independent researcher or faculty members. Unfortunately, because of this odd ratio of number of people who are postdoctoral fellow and number of faculty positions are available, I think there was a report in 2012 around. I'm trying to recall exact year, but it was showing that only 5% of the postdoctoral researcher were successfully be able to convert into academic positions. Most people chose their path different than the science, so they went into different areas like teaching or regulation, or some absorbed in industry, but most people had to move or change their area and did not continue research as their primary careers.
Nice. Okay. So here I would like to tell all our audiences, as Dr. Manish also said, that postdoctoral position is a transition from your PhD to whatever you want to be. You want to be in academia as a faculty, you want to be in industry as a scientist, you want to be anything or anyone. This is a place where you should be very cautious and conscious that what you are doing. One of the suggestions, as Dr. Manish just said, that you should learn to branching out, bifurcate, you develop your own projects, put your eggs in different baskets. Like there are more than one project going in that lab, try to be part of those, because that gives you that opportunity that if something at some of the projects are getting scooped or not working well, you still have something to rely on. Because yes, publication is a thing which people like this is another part of research where some people say that this is the currency, without this you cannot do anything. But there are PIs as well as researchers who have a very long duration gap between the publications, but because they were accumulating data, they just come up with all the Nature, Science, Cell, all of those. So you have to decide that what path you want to follow. So coming back to Dr. Manish, when you saw that this is what was happening, there was lack of funding, sometimes you have to switch over. How does this impact the family?
It did. We have been moving a lot. In fact, if I look at last 20 years, or even before my marriage, on an average, we have been moving anywhere between 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I moved a lot after my PhD, first postdoctoral, second postdoctoral, and after I get the faculty position here.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it impacts the family. We had a child growing up with this, so he had to change school. So first big transition for him was to switch from India to US. So he had to start over again, his first grade.
Mm-hmm.
My wife had a lot of difficulty finding a job. Back in India, she was a teacher in a school, but here she was not able to find a job. First, we came on J1 visa, so we had to apply for work permit or work authorization in the United States. So she got it, but then that created a gap of a year, and after that, it was hard for her to get a school job because of the cultural and language differences. And so it impacts your family in a way, and we kept moving. So sometime because of the move, we end up in a school zone, or we lived in an apartment which was not in a good school zone. So my son had to face those problems at school as well. So
Mm-hmm.
yes, it has impacted family in a big way.
Mm-hmm.
But we survived, I guess.
Yeah.
um, yeah, so yes, it does impact families during the move. But again, in my case, I think I was the primary breadwinner for the house. So my wife kept following me, and she did not prioritize her career.
Mm-hmm.
It can be very difficult if both uh, both in a couple are from science background, and both of them are researchers. So um, it can create a lot of problems. Sometimes people don't prefer to hire a couple in the same lab, or sometime one of the spouse has to follow another one and find a job in the same place if they move.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, it is a big hassle, and that's why I was emphasizing earlier that postdoctoral fellowship or postdoctoral research should be a stepping stone towards your faculty position. So it should not be. But nowadays, I think the norm is anywhere between 5 to 6 years
Mm-hmm.
is there. Now, another issue, particularly for us who migrate from India or immigrate from India, we also have to deal with work authorization for spouses, and depending on the visa, and we also have to deal with this tedious process of obtaining permanent residency.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it can take years. And so those are the challenges that we all have to face.
Yeah. I think this is very important. And here again, I would like to tell all our audiences that sometimes most of the people, what they do is like when by the time they are getting their PhD degrees, either like they're below 30s or around touching 30s, they are so excited to move out of the country. Always keep in mind, these are the ground realities, which just Dr. Manish just explained nicely. It is not about just the cultural shock which you have to face. Either it is about the work permits or about the visa issues. It is everything which you have to consider that will, be good for you and for the family, because then you can save some hustle and you can utilize that energy for your research. So speaking of which, we have touched about the family part of it, the research part of it. When it comes to the individual ambition, how important is that a person wants to come out of India and they have family, a very joint, because in India still there are joint families and very concerned. So what a person should consider when they have the opportunities in India or abroad? Any comment on that?
Yeah, so so yes, moving to a different country and living there for rest of your life is a big decision that an individual has to make. Again, it is an individual choice because people can decide to go back to India or can stay here long term. Typically, many of my friends actually went back to India because they found here that there was no social life, or there was a lack of social life, and they missed their family back home, and they had some other obligations or responsibilities that they needed to take care of. So typically there are pathways nowadays that one can go through to get a permanent faculty position in India. So for example, there are different fellowships like Ramalinga Swami Fellowship and other fellowships. There are plenty of them, DBT scholarships that allow the researcher to come back and explore the possibilities of becoming a faculty in India. The idea is that if you come to do a postdoctoral research in US, you take advantage of it, you stay here for a few years, publish good publications, carve out a niche for yourself in the research, that the area that you want to identify yourself, and then you apply back and go back. Getting back, going back to India and getting a job there is also very competitive because there are, again, there are like limited number of positions that are available, and the number of PhDs every year are way higher than those numbers. So because of that, it can be very competitive. And in fact, many a cases, in many cases, uh, people were not able to go back despite their efforts, and they stayed here because they couldn't find a job back in India.
Mhm.
So it's important that you have a defined program or defined research area that you work in. You publish good publications and you keep applying, and also keep in contact with the faculties in India, because sometimes networking plays an important role. In fact, everywhere networking is one of the key factor in making your application successful.
Mhm.
Um, so
So I believe,
but at the end of the day, it's personal choice if you want to stay here. Both places have their own advantages and disadvantages. They have their own challenges and um, um, opportunities that you can avail.
yeah. So you briefly touched about networking and keeping the contacts in there. So what we know researchers, like collaboration is the key for any successful research. Most of them, that's how they develop. So when a researcher is collaborating in more than one country or in more than one field, they are opening up their possibilities to switch those paths at any point of time. And the other point is like they are giving opportunity to others also who are working with them and making the network stronger and stronger, because sometimes your collaborators are the one who suggest you that about the positions, about the fundings, and communication should always be there, which will take you to your destination. This is one thing which I would like to tell all our audience, that never feel shy. Never think that if you write an email to someone, they might respond or not. The maximum they can do is they will not respond, which is totally fine. You should be open for that, because this is the training which will take you for the entire lifetime. The attitude of a researcher should always be positive. There will be hurdles, there will be bumps, but you have to make your way out and succeed. That's what research is about, and that is one part of that is researcher celebrity. What we do is like we celebrate your research, that whatever you are doing will be impacting human life as a whole. And here, because today we have Dr. Manish with us, whose area of expertise is environmental sciences. So when I say human health, I am talking about everything. So
Yeah.
Manish, when we talk about environmental sciences, and then when you are teaching here, you still feel that connect, that you want to do something for the environment, and if the gist is still there, you really want to do that. How do you fulfill those?
So there are two ways I'm doing that. So I would like to clarify first that I no longer work in the environmental biotechnology anymore. My research now moved from environmental biotechnology to the infectious diseases. So I was working on tuberculosis earlier, and then I moved to work on biofilm related problems in healthcare. And then I'm using now Clostridium difficile as a model to study the biology and infection of it. So I had to switch because of different reasons. Lack of funding was one of the reasons. However, I still truly believe that environmental biotechnology is the area that can solve a lot of these pollution problems. So I have developed a couple of courses to expand the curriculum of microbiology at Texas State University, which are focused on biotechnology. And one of the part of that biotechnology we talk about is environmental biotechnology. So I have developed a course, and the second way I do spread the word around on the on what we call is reduce, reuse, and recycle. So in the past, people used to talk about that in terms of sustainability, we should reduce the use of the resources, we should reuse them, and we should recycle them. So I have been kind of talking about that as a hidden curriculum to all of my classes, where we talk about in general, the Americans generate 5 times more waste compared to other countries, and we we use more resources, 5 times more resources compared to other countries. So we should not only control our use of resources, but also reuse them. And I give a lot of them examples because when I was growing up, we used to have like a single pen that will be used for like 3-4 years of our education. Here, people go through them like every day or almost every week, if not every day. We used to have limited number of clothes. We used to have limited number of shoes. Limited, everything was limited, and yes, largely it was because of the poverty and lack of money or lack of buying power. But still, we were able to live our life happily with that. And um, frankly speaking, no one needs 30 pairs of shoes in their closet, um, unless you're living your life um, for what they call entertainment, like a if you are always in the public eye, then it maybe you want to use that, but not for the general public. But people also don't use it. So I use those examples in the classroom to kind of highlight the problems that we have, and we use too much energy. So there are ways individual can contribute. And nowadays there is a new thought that is being promoted, is why it is individuals' responsibility to reduce the waste. Why not these big companies that makes billions of dollars every years? They should come up with the solutions to reduce the packaging, reduce the plastic, reduce the other waste. So we talk about those as well in the classroom, although they may not be directly related to the course. So I still have that, and I myself follow many of these practices where like I try to minimize my resources, and I try to minimize and reuse as much as I can. I used to believe in recycling for a long period of time, but now I lost that. So I no longer teach about recycling because only 10, 15, even not 10% of that recycled, like in terms of plastic. So I focus more on reducing and reusing rather than recycling. Um, but I think over the years, I also became American. Instead of living in a small apartment, now I live in a big house. Instead of using small car, I used to use a big car. So all these things are always there as a conflict. Where like, how do you bring a balance between what you use and where you cannot, where you can reduce it?
Nice. But as you said that you follow so many things, like you reduce the thing, the uses and all that. So that's what I wanted to say here, that once a researcher, always a researcher. There is no looking back. If you have the core values inside you, you will follow it to the T. And that's what makes you, every person here, I will say, like different from everyone else. Everyone is unique here. So we are running out, almost out of the time here. On the closing note, I would like to ask you, like, what are your suggestions for the young researchers, for the new generations of upcoming researchers, that what they should consider before entering to PhD, after completing their PhD, and then during the transition when they want to be a faculty?
So yes, I mean there are stages of what you're talking about are the stages of the career path for a scientist, and I think one thing we all know as a scientist that research is very slow progress in general. You need a lot of patience. 99.9% of time, your experiments fail or they don't tell you what you wanted to know. So you keep repeating them, keep doing them in different ways, testing different variables. So it's a slow process. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a systematic approach and problem solving abilities. Another set of skills that are called soft skills that are also required. So communication skills, you should be able to write and communicate effectively. Um, uh, Teamwork is also a soft skill. So as you mentioned earlier, collaborations and working in teams are some of the essential skills. So these are the core skills that you need to develop during your master's or bachelor's, so that when you enter in PhD or maybe earlier stages of your PhD when you're exploring. So once you do that, then after completion of your PhD, I think the postdoc should be used as a transition. And again, back in the days, most people were kind of focused on academic faculty positions, but nowadays there are a lot of industries, including biotech industries, are there where you can use your science and research to gain job and build a career on it. So there are a lot of opportunities. So be open, and there are new avenues that have opened up, like scientific writing, editing. In fact, um, another area that has recently come up is like scientific illustrations. So though if you have those artistic skills, you can explore your career in those areas. So you don't have to be limited in, as a researcher, limited in a lab and working with the chemicals and test tube. There are a lot of other areas that are opened up as well. And again, teamwork, collaboration, effective communication, and persistent are some of these characteristic of a scientist. So if you can develop these skills, will help you achieve your career goals.
Nice. Thank you very much, Dr. Manish, with us. And I would like to tell all of our audience that if they want to contact Dr. Manish directly, they can directly email him, or they can use the platform of Empowering Science Foundation, and we'll connect you with him. We will see all our viewers in another episode of Researchers Celebrities. For now, today we will say thank you to Dr. Manish for sharing the journey and giving the words of wisdom for our viewers. Thank you very much, Dr. Manish.
No problem. You're very welcome.